This episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast is brought to you by Nomadicare. Now, personally, I love Nomadicare. I've used Nomadicare, and I recommend the company to all new travelers. What Nomadicare does is it takes the fear out of getting set up with a bad recruiter, which is the biggest fear that you have jumping into this journey. So they sit down, they interview recruiters, they vet them, get them on a list, and then provide them to you as a free service, as a free recruiter matchmaking service in order to get you started on your journey. Now, usually you only get 2 recruiters going through Nomadicare, but being a listener of the show, you can get 3. So this is how it's going to work. You go to nomadicare.com/Dylan. You will get set up with 3 recruiters to be on your dream team, as well as a guide to get you started on your journey.
What is going on, everybody? This is Josh Payne, and this is the Mobile PT Podcast. We're here with another episode, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, David Bailiff, and we have a really cool special guest today with us today. His name is Dylan Callier, and this is the guy to know in regards to travel PT. So he is the co-host of the New Medical Nomads podcast, and he helps new grad physical therapists become successful traveling physical therapists. And we really just wanted to share this episode with you guys and ask him some questions so that our audience can learn more about the really great world of traveling PT. But I'm going to let Dylan go ahead and introduce himself first. So Dylan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it, and appreciate the invite to come on to the show. Usually I'm the one doing the interviewing, so it's nice to sit back and just let the questions roll in and, kind of fire away. But yeah, so my name is Dylan Callier. I am a traveling physical therapist. My Hogwarts house is Slytherin, for those Harry Potter nerds out there. And I've been traveling just short of a year now, and I've been operating the podcast for a little over a year now. And I started it with the intent of just learning more about the travel industry and kind of going after the people who've been doing it for a while, 7, 8 years, people who've been traveling 13 years, people just starting out and asking questions of what their fears are, where did they learn, what they wish they would have known starting out, and just getting their story. I think being a traveler, you get a whole bunch of really cool stories, and you get to share that on a platform. It's really, really cool. So that's kind of where the podcast started, and just the ability to connect with people and network and just learn from them has been exponential. And so I've absolutely loved the entire journey of performing the podcast, and especially here on the road now that I'm out in California.
Excellent. Awesome. Everybody, this is David here. So Dylan here, he went to Maryville University there in St. Louis, Missouri, and he's originally a Southern Missouri boy. Now, did you start right into traveling right out of school? And if so, like what drew you to travel PT?
Yeah, so I did not actually start fresh out of school. That was the plan, though. So I found out Maryville University is a freshman entry-level program. So I was fortunate enough to know what I wanted to do, to know that I wanted to do PT straight out of high school. So I went into this program. It wasn't until my 3rd year of undergrad that I stumbled on this idea of traveling, and that you can actually hop around between hospital to hospital or clinic to clinic or agency to agency and work and be like, their superhero, the one that wears the capes and comes in and saves the day because they have so many patients they don't know what to do with. And so that was the plan from that point forward. But then about 2 weeks before I graduated, my good friend, the first person I ever shadowed for PT, my clinical instructor, and then he also ended up becoming my first boss, he came forward and said, "Hey, I'm actually starting my own clinic with 2 other partners. We would love for you to work with us." And so I came to this fork in the road of doing this dream that I've been planning for 4 years, or to, kind of push that off for a year and see what it would be like to start up a brick and mortar PT clinic. And so I ended up deciding that travel PT would always be there for me, but I was going to push that off for a year, and then I was going to work with him for a year and start out this outpatient clinic. And so we ended up growing it from 1 clinic to 3 in a year. And then by that time, my time was done, and I stuck to my word because I was very nervous about something happening with family or something like that, and me kind of just settling into Missouri and never getting to explore the rest of the country, explore the rest of the world, which is why I travel. And so once that year was up, then I left and started travel PT.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, back in the day when, when I was like in school and we had 8-track tapes and stuff, travel PT seemed like a cool thing. People talked about it. And then the notion of it just seemed to kind of disappear, at least out of my Jahari's window. So, having you on and hearing about travel again, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that. And so it's kind of, for me, it's cool to learn about this. And for those coming out, what would be the selling points to someone to want to go into travel?
Yeah, absolutely. So something historically to kind of just let you in on for why it might have died out. Travel or physical therapy or even the healthcare market itself is highly reflective of the market in general. And so when the market took a dip in 2008, all of the hospitals also started getting very conservative with their expenditures. And so basically they stopped hiring all these travelers and they just dealt with the patients. And it died down for a while, and it was very hard for travelers to get jobs. And so those who were specifically like travelers, they all of a sudden had to just start taking PRN jobs until the market went back up. Coming out of school, if you are trying to travel as a new grad, your ability to do so highly reflects on the market. So if you're coming out of school, and currently, if you asked about 3 different agencies, there's about 400 jobs for a traveling physical therapist. That's very good. Normal is around 200, but currently there's about double that. So you get to be really picky with what you want to choose and who you want to work with. So if you get an interview with somebody and they don't even ask you any questions, and they just say, hey, when can you start? And you ask them about, what the orientation looks like, and you get that icky feeling. If the market's bad, you have to go with that because there's not another option. If the market's good, you go with your intuition. You say, no, I'm actually just going to wait until the next interview, or can you get me somebody on the phone who's maybe in the clinic that can answer these questions? And so you get a lot more flexibility with that. The selling point for traveling, people usually travel for 3 reasons. The first is traveling for location, which is why I travel. I want to be able to see all the cool stuff and do all the cool things. I was getting my haircut the other day, and the hairdresser was like, oh, you're going on this big trip. Are you doing some soul searching? It's like, no, I just want to see some cool stuff. So location, you get to take time off in order to basically enjoy the area. So I'm taking 2 months off and traveling across the seas over to Thailand and Bali for 2 months. And that'll be my first big milestone trip. And that's why I travel. The second reason people travel is for settings. Either they want to open up a clinic, they're very entrepreneurial, they don't want to get kind of brought into a clinic chain and have to worry about non-compete clauses, or they want to make a little bit more cash so that they can open up their own clinic, or they want to see other clinics and how they run in order to open up their own clinic, or they don't know what they want to do and they just want to kind of try out everything. Maybe they do acute over here, maybe they do a neuro rehab, then they go to a SNF and they come back to home health. And it's a way for them to gain that experience and figure out where they belong and what best they fit into. And then thirdly, the pay is better. Mostly, it's not the best way to make money in the industry, but it is one of the better ways. And so if that kind of aligns with you going out somewhere and enjoying the area as well, then you get to take benefit of both of those options.
Nice. But what about as far as like you get to a place, housing? Are you responsible for your own housing?
Yeah, so it depends on the agency that you use. Usually any medium or larger agencies will offer to find housing for you. One of the biggest marketing ploys is that they say, oh, you get free housing, we'll fly you out there for free, we'll rent a car for you for free. Nothing's free in this industry, and that actually all comes from your bucket of money. And so how the business works is that the hospital pays a lump sum for every hour that you work. The travel agency, they take about 25% off the top. That's usually pretty average. And then they give you the rest. If they start taking out of your bucket of money and start paying for that first flight or first class ticket at the airport, and then they house you on the New York Square for a weekend, and then they rent you a really nice SUV, like that's all coming out of your cash. And so you can either do that. Some people really like that. And finding housing is by far the most stressful part for me when I travel. But if you take the money and run per se and just find it on your own, you will always come out financially ahead. And so if that aligns with your goals and that aligns with your why, I definitely recommend taking that money and finding it on your own. Or if you're just a worrywart and you're nervous and this whole thing freaks you out, then you can let somebody else take care of it for you.
Got it. I can really align with number two, not knowing what the heck I wanted to do when I first came out. And I want to ask you a question, but basically I didn't really understand where I fit into this whole physical therapy world. I was confused. I had no idea. And I had actually thought of traveling PT at a time, but I had my fiance, who's my wife, who's also a physical therapist. And I always told her, I was like, hey, Shelby, we've got to do this traveling thing. And you and I both do it. We'll travel around to similar locations. And she just was never into it. So I guess my biggest question immediately to you is, what do you say to PTs that want to do it, that may have a significant other or may have a family? Is it just not an option for you?
Actually, most guests that I've had on the show, they are in a relationship of some sort. It's actually, so far from what I've seen, fairly rare to find a single traveler. That being said, I am a single traveler and there are single travelers out there, but a lot of them, surprisingly, because you don't usually think of it, you think it's going to be like a single person's game. But a lot of them are in relationships. And so some people do the long distance and they make it work and it works great for them. Some people travel together. In your instance, it could have been a travel PT couple. And there's actually, if you go to ptadventures.com, Stephen and Ellen Stockhausen, they actually have a kid. I think Kenley is about 3 months old now. And they travel with their baby girl and with 2 large dogs. And so they make it work. And so you can definitely make it work traveling with a significant other as well. And then there's also couples out there, persons who can work from home. One's a travel PT, the other is a business analyst of some sort. And one will go to the clinic, one will go to the coffee shop, do all their work, come back together at the end of the day, and then go on an adventure. And so it can definitely work. I'm still looking for a couple that one is a traveler and then the other is like just picks up odd jobs, because I feel like there's a couple out there that does that. And so like I would totally be okay with just bouncing around and working at like a bartender. And I think that would be such a cool experience. But I've yet to find those couples. So if you're listening to this and you're a travel couple or you're interested, let me know. We'll get your story out there.
That is awesome. I had a question and like me and all these gray hairs, I forget about it, but you were talking about that and the traveling, what are the challenges of traveling? Other than obviously, like if you're in a relationship, it could be a challenge if it's long distance, or one person wants to travel, the other doesn't, or you mentioned the stress of maybe potentially having to find your own place to live or getting a vehicle or whatever. But what other challenges are out there?
Yeah. So I think the challenges kind of come down to two categories. There's professional challenges and then there's personal challenges. One for me, when I settled down for that year, worked with my friend, I got used to seeing my family every week. I got used to seeing my nephews every week, my grandma every weekend. When it was time for me to pack up and go, it was much harder than it was when I was, bouncing around for clinicals. So the goodbye was tough, and the goodbyes never really get easier. You make a friend that you hang out with almost three months straight, and then it's time for you to kind of pack up and leave. And so those goodbyes are definitely hard. Other personal challenges are when you get to a new area. I was a big fitness guy, gym every day, hour and a half. Now you're in a new area and you have to find that gym, and their prices are higher because it's going to be like a temporary 3-month thing. If you go to the grocery store, you're not used to it. You spend like an hour and a half just trying to find freaking broccoli somewhere because you don't know where they keep it. And it's always in the one corner that you never look. And so it being in a new area, you can't walk with like your head down. You always have to be looking around and be conscious of where you're going, because otherwise you'll miss your turn when you're heading home. And so it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. First for, trying to keep those habits strong and trying to stay healthy on top of everything else that you have to do for contract, for interviews or signing contracts or doing skills checklists and just all the paperwork that goes into it. But also it makes you really present in the moment. And that was something I always struggled with being in school. I was always thinking of the next thing, what am I going to do next? Got into Smart Success PT. What am I going to do next? And then all of a sudden now I'm in this gorgeous place where there's actually mountains in the background compared to Missouri where it's all flat and you're able to stay present. The professional challenges, those come with, you're expected basically to show up and save the day. So you're expected to learn very quickly their systems and how to fit in. My very first contract, I showed up, I got about 2 hours to learn their documentation system. Also take a HIPAA quiz. And then I had 6 evaluations that day in outpatient, and only 2 spoke English. The other 4 spoke Spanish only, and no habla español. So that was a very big shock when it came into traveling, but you're expected to kind of learn that. And so going into it, you can definitely ask about the orientation process, get a detailed list of what it's going to look like, so that if you're going into something new, like I am now with home health, you want to make sure that orientation is longer. But if you worked a year or 2 in outpatient and you're pretty solid, you might not need that orientation. You can take that other job.
Got it. Yeah. And you're actually talking about one of the next questions that was popping into my head, because those professional challenges that you were just explaining is, I think, probably one of the main questions that most people ask in regards to travel PT is, are you just going to get stuck with like all the crappy positions that nobody wants, and you're going to be put into this really terrible situation and you're going to hate it? Most of the travel PTs I've talked to, that's generally not the case, but I have heard that multiple times from PTs. So, how do you combat that, I guess, would be the best question.
Yeah. So what I found is the persons that I've had on the show, the veterans, the ones that have traveled for 6, 7, 8 years, they only have one experience. And it usually only takes one experience for you to realize that you're in control of accepting that position. You're not forced to take any position. It's not like the military where they tell you where to go. Again, it all depends on the market. But if the market's good, then it's up to you to ask the right questions in order to make sure that you don't end up in those positions. The clinician really has to sit down and think of the questions that they need to ask or ask around in order to make sure that they don't end up in a position where it's just an exercise mill. The veterans usually only have one bad experience because that's what it takes to learn. Now with like the podcast and all these blogs going out about travel PT and travel nursing in general, any travel healthcare position, there's a lot of information out there, so you can better prepare yourself and get knowledgeable when you go into those interviews, to know to ask, what's your productivity level? Or, why do you need a travel PT? Is it because you've grown 50% of your patient population in the past 6 months and you can't hire enough permanent PTs quick enough, which is the current situation that I'm in? Or is it you're in the middle of Ohio and nobody wants to be there? Or is it everybody's abandoning ship because the business is going down, the business is failing, it's bad management, something like that? And so knowing to ask those questions, and then also knowing how to kind of feel it out and see if it's a true statement or not, is kind of where they call them soft skills for travelers, but I really think it's hard skills, where you get to know how to interview, how to negotiate, how to read contracts, things like that.
Very cool. No, that's a great answer. I mean, what I was kind of looking for there was kind of those specific things to look for, and I think you nailed it. Those are all things I probably wouldn't think of asking if I were to go get a travel PT job right now. So that's great. I mean, I think that's really helpful for our listeners. And and then kind of diving into another subject is, when you get a contract and you enjoy what you're doing, you enjoy your setting, when you finish an assignment, do you go into it like really wanting to like leave a certain legacy with that place, or leave a true impact with that specific place that you're at?
You guys sent me the list before we got on, and I was so excited for this question because it's something I haven't really thought about. But usually with contracts, persons that go into it that try to kind of change everything, don't leave that contract with a very good taste in their mouth, or the supervisors don't necessarily like them that much. But you have to understand that going in, that you're not a consultant, that you are a worker, that you're supposed to fit in their systems and go for it. So it's kind of like a patient in PT. If they don't believe physical therapy is going to work, doesn't matter if you give them the best exercise regimen or manual therapy or whatever, it's probably not going to work, because they're not going to do their stuff at home. But if you show up to a clinic and they are like, you came from this other clinic, or you've seen all these other places, is there something that you see that we can do differently? If you are approached, then you can follow up with those questions and be able to kind of implement and change how they run the facility. My previous contract, it was a very high patient volume clinic for outpatient, because they needed it. It was supposed to be a 4 PT clinic. I showed up. I ended up being the only PT with 2 other PTAs. And so we were seeing who we could see. And so because of that, there was a lot of morale issues with the employees. And they had a new office manager, and the office manager approached me, and then we ended up sitting down for about an hour and a half and just talking about step by step how to start changing the clinic, and how she was going to be able to implement that and get the morale back up, start taking care of the patients again, get those good reviews coming in again. And so they definitely have to be open to it. But even just going in and just smiling and being nice to everyone, like the biggest compliment for a traveler is for them to ask you to extend. So you can always extend as a traveler up to a year, and then you lose the tax benefits that come along with it. But if they ask you to extend, that's like the biggest compliment. But yeah, I would say if they're open to it and they approach you, or you can even suggest it towards the end once you build a good rapport, that's definitely something that you can have an impact on that clinic and then overall the industry. Even small things. I was in a hospital setting, and being able to do functional type tests, and my preceptor saw it and how easy I was able to throw those in there. And so that made her change how she practiced, because the hospital was trying to push that, but they didn't know how to implement it. And then she saw how to implement it, and now she's doing it. And so just little things like that. But I love that question of going in and having an impact on the clinic, having an impact on the hospital, having an impact on the profession. And I think one of the really cool potentials that travelers have is if we have these exercise mills that are looking for other PTs, these traveler PTs, because it can't hold on to a permanent PT because nobody wants to work there because it's just a mill. And all of a sudden the traveler PTs stop taking those jobs. That business is going to have to change, and they're going to have to start seeing patients appropriately. And so I think we hold a lot of power with that. And so when your last resort is no longer a resort, then you have to start changing the industry.
Is there Dylan, is there like a job board or message board or anything like that, where, like, let's say you go to a clinic, it's a mill, that you can post like, hey, you might want to steer clear of this place? Do you guys give anybody heads up like that?
As of now, not specifically for physical therapists. There are groups out there. Highway Hypodermics has a page. Bluepipes.org has a page specifically for nurses, for hospitals like that. There are some shady clinics, and the most recent one that comes to mind was a clinic that was up in Alaska, and they will hire PTs without guaranteeing a 30-day notice of a cancellation of a contract, which is very important to have, because if you're driving all the way from Missouri to California and you get there and they say, oh, actually tomorrow's going to be your last day, after only working a week or so, like you're in the hole for money, because you owe all this money for housing. You just made that travel expense all the way across the states. So this clinic in Alaska was getting people all the way up there, and then they would say, oh, actually, we're not interested in a traveler anymore. So you can either become a permanent person for us, or we're going to hire somebody else. So in those instances, those stories usually get out. And there are some Facebook groups online. New Medical Nomads is one. My own Facebook group. There's also the Traveling Traveler or Travel Therapy Therapist group where they post a lot of those. But there's no actual board in order to look out for those. So it's just knowing what the red flags are, making sure that you have those in the contracts, making sure that you're safe, especially for big trips like that, and then knowing how to do an interview and how to follow your intuition.
Right. Well, and I have to apologize. I hate for that I just changed the subject there all of a sudden, but you just, when you were talking about legacies to leave behind, that you mentioned something that just kind of led me to, what if there is a situation where it's like, oh, this is kind of shady and or horrible, but I like what you said about leaving that legacy. That I think first of all, it's probably is important, really, for your particular industry, travel industry, that you don't come in with the attitude of, hey, there's a new sheriff in town. That might not be, too good for others to follow. But that is just the little small things of how you can make an impact. Like you said, you demonstrated how you brought in, some functional testing technique into a clinic, and, without being just like in your face, but you just, quietly introduced it and it was picked up. And so, I think those are great points there, of that you can leave a legacy by just being good and smiling and doing what you do, and then let others see that. Unless, like you mentioned, the clinic says, hey, you've been around, what can we do better? So.
Absolutely. And I just I had a thought there. Where'd it go? All my roommates are running around in the background, slamming doors.
Well, speaking of moving around place to place, how is it handled in terms of licensure? Because typically, therapists may be licensed in one state. So if you're a traveler, how does that work?
Yeah. So there are, I'll give you the old way that we used to do it, and then the new way that's coming out here recently. So the old way is that you just go through a normal state licensure like you would if you were moving to that state. So for Missouri, I passed boards. I submitted all the paperwork I needed to submit, proved that I was who I was, and got all my fingerprints taken. And then I had my Missouri license. Then when I needed to get my California license, it takes a little bit longer. Took me about 4 months to get it back. Submitted for that. They had to verify my Missouri license, make sure that I was still an outstanding PT. Do all the fingerprints again, and just go through that process. And so you would have to do that process for every single state. And then you would have to keep what I did as a Google document file of all the licensure I have, all the CEUs that I needed, the specifics, if they need an ethical CEU course taken, or if they need, 10 of the CEUs need to be in person, not online, making those notes along the way. And then keeping track of it and knowing when to renew. So about every 2 years, depending on the state. Now there is something called the compact PT licensure going through. And the best way to explain a compact licensure is your driver's license. And so your driver's license, you get it in one state, but because it's a compact license, it is good in every state that you go. For PT, we're slowly starting to introduce it to states. So my home state is Missouri, which is part of the compact. So now if I want to work in Oregon, I just have to take their test, pay some money, and then they have all my fingerprints and everything else, and my license is good. I can start working that same week. And so it's a lot quicker process than having to wait like 4 months like I did for California. Not all states are a part of it. It'll take a very long time for all states to be a part of it. But for those who are able to take advantage of that new opportunity, it is a lifesaver for a traveler.
So it sounds like right now, first of all, I'm hearing that you got to be pretty well organized, keep all your stuff together to make your life simpler. But also, like you said, California, if it takes 4 months to get information back, you really have to strategize your assignments in terms of the timing.
Absolutely. So I'm definitely not the organizer type. So it was definitely a forced organization and a trial by fire. So learning how to get organized along the way, which it's better to do at the beginning if you can. But then, yeah, being aware of the countries, or sorry, the states that need that 4 months or 6 months in order to get that licensure, or knowing that Hawaii usually takes a little bit longer, regardless, because they have to look at all your licenses and it takes a while to get it all out there. And Hawaii runs on a different time anyhow, and so they're super slow with everything. But and then knowing like Texas, I think they only take about 2 weeks. So if you ever like you're in a pinch for a job, there's tons of jobs in Texas. You just apply for the licensure, you get it in 2 weeks, license in hand, you get a job.
Nice. So where is you said you mentioned Hawaii and some different places. Where's your favorite place that you've traveled to so far?
Ooh, I would say so I've been in only California as a travel PT so far. Started in Southern and then been working my way up north. But when I was on a clinical, I went to Birmingham, Alabama, and that was my first. I was really excited to be a travel PT. It was my first time really out of the state. I went to this family's home, and they allowed me to stay in their home for 5 weeks without charging me. And so I got to every weekend go out and just enjoy the culture. And so the bars are pretty new there because they just passed laws that allowed bars to like start carrying like liquor and stuff. So the bar scene was growing. There's a lot of music festivals down there. I was right by the University of Alabama, and that was my favorite place so far. And I think it was just because of all the emotion that was going through me of like, wow, this is the lifestyle that I'm going to be able to create for myself.
That's great, man. I think, just hearing you talk about all of this, I think I really do think it's just such an awesome opportunity for new grads. And even myself, I've been a PT for 5 years, and really only the past 2 years have I been super passionate about what I'm doing. But man, instead of fumbling around for my first 3 years, if I could go back now, being a traveling PT would be freaking awesome. Like just the experiences that you get, the places you get to travel to, the different settings that you get to do, the different people that you get to work with, because you're generally always working with people, right? You're not, it's not like you're being thrust into a home health situation where you're gonna have to be working by yourself. I think it's an awesome opportunity for new grads. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think people that are listening to this, if you are, one of those three that Dylan was talking about, you want to go travel, you want to try different settings because simply you just don't really know where you fit into the BT world, which is a lot of us. And then obviously the pay is better, especially than most physical therapy clinics these days. I mean, if that sounds good to me, I don't know about a lot of you guys out there, but I just think it's an awesome opportunity for a lot of new grads.
I think it'd be a great way to also kind of hone your skills too. I mean, if you're constantly in a new environment, proving yourself or learning from other therapists, hopefully learning from other therapists.
Yeah, I will. I'll chime in on a hot button right now. And the question that seems to be going around is mentorship and whether you can get it or not as a travel PT. And my quote that I say is you shouldn't expect mentorship on the road, but you can absolutely get it. So my very first job, we were so flooded with patients and business oriented and stuff. I probably got a total of like 5 hours of like sit down time of like, learning manual therapy techniques or, learning insurances and stuff like that. And so I ended up having to go to online resources in order to gain all that experience. With my very first contract as a travel PT, I got 2 hours every week because we would have patients cancel. And then my manager at the place was super, really motivated to help teach younger therapists. And so she would pull me aside and be like, hey, here's an ankle mode that I usually do on all my tennis players, and they love it. And so I got a lot more mentorship on that first contract than I did that her whole first year as a PT. So it's definitely not something you should expect. I would definitely highly recommend a online mentorship program. MedBridge is also just a really good option for CEU courses. Again, Smart Success PT is what I went through. There's also the Institute of Clinical Excellence. They have a lot of good stuff as well. Being able to take your education and take that mentorship into your own hands, and then also get to see all the different types of patients in the different areas. My last outpatient clinic, we had a bunch of patellar tendon ruptures. I had like 5 in a 5-week period that I'd never seen before. And then when I was at my first job ever, I saw tons of Parkinson's patients, and going through school, like I hated studying Parkinson's. And so it forced me to learn more about Parkinson's. And so the mentorship, it's definitely out there, but also for those who aren't really interested in travel PT, or they are and they end up taking a permanent job, a lot of that mentorship that you're promised going into a permanent position, if it's not in the contract, it's not formal, you don't have anything saying that you're going to sit down for 30 minutes every single week and talk, it's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to fall to the side. So my biggest thing is mentorship. You might not be able to expect it anyhow coming out as a grad. So if that's something you really hold high and dear that you want, residencies and fellowships might be the way to go, or at least make sure that it's in the contract, whether that's for travel or it's for permanent.
That's so true. I mean, I certainly didn't have it, and I was told, promised all these different things that I would have tons of mentorship, and I did not have it at all. So that's a great point. Well, Dylan, I mean, if people are interested in travel PT after listening to this podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I host the New Medical Nomads podcast. You can find that at newmedicalnomads.com, or you can find me on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, basically anywhere you're at, your favorite podcast app, I'm at as well. And then I also have a New Medical Nomads Facebook page for all the promoted posts, and then a Facebook group of New Medical Nomads for any travel questions. So you can definitely reach me there. I tell people I'm a Facebook floozy. I'll add anyone. So just add me on Facebook and shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to talk travel all day, every day.
Excellent. You know, Dylan, thank you so much for your time. I do have one final question.
Yeah.
I kind of picture you more of a Gryffindor kind of guy, not a Slytherin. Why Slytherin?
Why Slytherin? I don't know. It was an identity crisis for me. So I was like, for sure, like Ravenclaw. And then I took it and I got Slytherin, and I was like, no, that ain't right. And I took it and I got Slytherin. Like, no, that ain't right. And then I took it a third time, I got Gryffindor. I was like, oh, that's definitely not right. And the fourth time I got Slytherin. And then fifth time I got Ravenclaw. Finally, at that point I had accepted it. But as long as I'm not a Hufflepuff,
okay. Yeah, you don't fit Hufflepuff. Oh, okay, well, hey, this has been awesome. You know, I know for a lot of people listening to the podcast that may be kind of stuck of where to go, what to do when I graduate. This has been some awesome information for them. So thank you for coming on the air and sharing all that. Again, thank you for your time. And for all our listeners out there, we thank you for joining us. And hey, Nate, cue that music again. I'm ready to listen to some more of that music we got going on. So everybody, we'll see you next time.